I've not received the link yet, Peter.
Okay, I'm sending you right now. Okay.
Are we online?
And Peter, I still have not got the link.
Do you have the link?
No, could you just put it in the
Yes, in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm about to put the link in. So we'll be going live pretty much as soon as that's like a minute or 30 seconds.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you. Are we going to get extra 10 minutes or not really?
Yes, I can change the program to also give the extra time. So we can put it to 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can start.
Yes, you're on live.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Aleksandra Hirschfeld, and I am honored to moderate this discussion, which is dedicated to the Decade of Art and Science program in the LAZNIA Center for Contemporary Art in Gdańsk in Poland. The name of this program is Art and Science Meeting, and it was launched in 2011 as an art and research project, which has offered exhibitions, conferences, debates, and performances. The main aim of this program was to draw the attention to the growing importance of interdisciplinary art to art that interacts with other practices, especially science. What is worth to mention is that LAZNIA Center with this program is one of the institutions that were dealing with that kind of art relatively early compared to other art institutions in the world. In a very broad sense, during those 10 years, LAZNIA Center prepared variety of exhibitions that were focusing inter alia on bio-art, interactive art, robotic art, or cyborg art. Besides that, what is exceptional, LAZNIA Center managed to publish a unique collection of several books as an important additional research part of these exhibitions. Before we move on to the discussion, I would like to introduce you my wonderful and special guests of our debate, who happen to be also authors, artists and creators involved in Art and Science Meeting program. I would like to welcome Professor Ryszard Kluszczyński, who started the whole idea. He is a well-known media art writer, curator, professor of culture and media studies at Łódź University in Poland, where he's a chair of the Department of New Media and Digital Culture. And of course, he's also the artistic director of Art and Science Meeting program at LAZNIA Center, where he curated a large part of all of the exhibitions. With us is also Jadwiga Harzyńska, who is the director of LAZNIA Center since 2004. Earlier, she worked in the National Museum in Gdańsk. Her most important long-term program initiatives at LAZNIA are Outdoor Gallery of the City of Gdańsk and, of course, Art and Science Meeting. Please welcome also Nina Cegledy, who is an independent curator, artist, research, and educator based in Canada. She collaborates internationally on art and science and technology projects. Currently, she's involved in a Light Footprint in the Cosmos 2022 at the invitation of the Substantial Motion Research Network. What you might remember, she curated the Leonardo 50th exhibition for the cyber arts for Ars Electronica in 2018. Nina Cegledy curated also one of the first exhibition in LAZNIA Center in 2011 called The Pleasure of Light. And now she's going to create the next one called Sensoria, the Art of Science of Our Senses. I would also like to welcome Krista Sommerer, who is an internationally renowned media artist, researcher, and pioneer of interactive art. She originally studied botany and anthropology before completing a study in sculpture in Vienna. In her artistic practice, she deals with ecological and biological topics, aiming to raise awareness about plants and the environment through art. Since 30 years, she collaborates with media artist and professor Laurent Minono, and they both in 2004 set up the Department of Interface Cultures and the University of Art and Design in Linz, in Austria, of course. And last but not least, please welcome Chris Salter, who is an artist, professor of design and computation arts at Concordia University in Montreal, and also a co-director of Hexagram. His performances, installation, research, and publication have been presented at festivals and exhibitions in more than 15 countries. Chris Salter curated one of the last exhibitions in the LAZNIA Center in 2020 called Sensory Orders. His new book, Sensing Machines, will be published by Mid Press in 2022. So the aim of this discussion is to reflect upon the position of LAZNIA Center program in the context of institutional activities within the field of art and science. And one more thing before we start, I just want to encourage the audience to ask our guests also questions throughout the Swapcards platform. I will be having it on my cell phone. So if it's okay, I will start with Professor Kluszczyński with the first question. So, Ryszard, we all can agree that the marriage of art and science is one of the fundamental shifts in contemporary art world. How did it happen from the historical point of view that contemporary art has an increasing need to connect with other disciplines, especially science, and how strongly art based on science was presented in the artistic program of LAZNIA Center?
There's a famous statement attributed to William Gibson saying that the future is already here, it is just not evenly distributed. I think that this is the about the history of relationship between art and science. Some of the researchers, some of the writers think that from one side, it started with Leonardo da Vinci, or maybe even earlier with automata built several centuries before Leonardo. Some other things that when we talk about contemporary model of art that started actually in Renaissance, we talk about the model of science built actually in the 19th century. Everything began in the late 20th century. But actually, when we have a look in the very beginning of new media art, I would see this beginning in the 50s, coming with cybernetic art and oscillographic art. We can notice that actually, in the very beginning of the development of new media art, we can observe the very important interaction between art and science. Cybernetic art could not appear without Wiener, without Ash, without people making research in the field of cybernetic and information theory. So what we can do actually, what we can say is that we've been observing the process of changing priorities. In the very early stage of development of new media art, we were kind of enthusiastically oriented towards possibility offered with technology. Artist was observing the process of building interfaces, organizing the process of interaction. Later on, suddenly, I remember actually the moment somehow in the late 90s, there was the famous exhibition in ZKM about future of cinema. And after the opening, we were discussing what's going on in the field of new media art. And actually everybody who was present there, was talking that there is a change, something very important. So the priorities has changed. We started to talk about correspondence between art and some other fields of social activities. So transdisciplinarity and transmediality became so important nowadays. Now we are living in the world organized with new media technology. So new media technology is not that much important for art in this sense that actually analyzing the possibility of new media is actually not that much fruitful. And we try to ask ourselves what art can provide the world, which is in the edge of final catastrophe, to say it dramatically. So I think that what we are observing now is just approach to analyze the important processes. And this is actually the moment when LAZNIA came to this project. We were trying to analyze from one side the history of interaction between art and science. This is why Nina curated the exhibition of Kepes and Malina, because they were the beginning of this modern process. But in the same time, we were trying to observe, to describe different forms of this interaction. We had Stellark with his perspective on interaction between art and science, as kind of cyborg perspective. We had artists dealing with robotics, artists pioneering in the field of media. So history, analysis of the recent developments, and kind of reflection on the future, how it developed later on. And I think that we are in the very middle of this process. So it's not easy to say what the next. I'm sure that I'd like to develop this program a little bit towards a relationship between art and softer kinds of science, with activism also, with politics, but this human scale politics made from a grassroots perspective. So hard science, soft science, activism should come together just to bring the most, I think, important for now vision of art interacting with the world.
Thank you very much for your answer. That's really thoughtful, especially when it comes to the future, like to connect those activism, like you said. I think it's really important. Can I now ask a question to Director of LAZNIA Center, Jadwiga Harzyńska? From the perspective of an art institution that shows both classical exhibitions, such as painting or sculptures, for example, how does a confrontation with the requirements of interdisciplinary art, which enters into intense relation with science, look like? For example, what does it look like to prepare an exhibition on bioart, which requires particularly important treatments? How, in your opinion, and based on your experience, a long experience, do the directors of artistic institutions locate this specific field of art in the context of their entire work?
Okay, I try describe it from the beginning. Your very wide question. Try answer because as you know, contemporary institution, culture institution, as we have described in our mission, is present at the latest artistic phenomena in the process of transformation, as we describe it in our program as well, and respond to the cultural and civilizational phenomena of contemporary world, that including, of course, art and science. And LAZNIA's program is divided in 4 pillars. So it's art and science, public art, international exchange, including residency program, and of course education. Of course, as you said on the beginning, art and science is in our program for more than a decade. And this what you're asking about, preparing exhibition, dealing with the subjects and serious challenges to the unusual requirements from the point of view of the artistic institution, especially in the case of bioart, where cooperation is with labs, with professional equipment, and protection of life structure or forms presented at the exhibition are necessary. In Gdańsk, our partner from the beginning was namely from Aaron Katz and Jonat Zur exhibition presented in 2012, was in the Collegiate Faculty of Biotechnology at University of Gdańsk and Medical University of Gdańsk. Of course, it was possible thanks to the openness and kindness of Professor Wojkowska, who was head of this department in that time. And if what I would like to say about an example, with the help of her faculty, in that time we have bred tissues that have been transported to us from Perth labs and were kept to the faculty lab until the exhibition opening, where they growing up for 2 weeks. I don't remember exactly. Of course, when we discuss about another project, because as you said, we have bioart software and hardware technology, also we're touching ecology aspects. Mainly artists have in their team IT engineers or any specialists. From our side is mainly to organize them the equipment, which also not easy often, but as our 10 years experience showing, it was possible. Apart the purely technical matters, it's important to communicate about the such project to the public. It is, I think, from institution like our important, especially in Poland, where fine art academies, as you know, are at the beginning of development of education in this area.
That's true.
However, during this decade, we managed to develop leading position in promoting this kind of art in Poland. In fact, only LAZNIA regularly presents this subject of art in frames the program Art and Science meeting. During this 10 years, I heard about few exhibitions in all the Polish institutions touching this subject. And what given us that since 2011 we hosted 53 artists presented during 19 exhibitions and published 16 publications. Our publication, I suppose, are the great success. Apart from the impressive list of artists invited during this time for the cooperation, I think the book series make us recognizable worldwide. And you ask also about decision director regarding the program. Decision is of course in the hands of director, because Polish policy is that everyone starting the competition, they must to describe the program for years when you apply, and of course. Competition is one matter, but also important to get people who want to cooperate with you around this project. And here, as you know, Richard, with whom I cooperate for many years, Ryszard Kluszczyński, who spoke a few minutes ago, it was the person who gave success of this project by his knowledge, and of course the team who was ready to be open for challenges with given this kind of difficult projects, which are not obvious on the Polish map of exhibiting program. And as you said, we are planning it, I say only from when we touched this program. Of course, a few years ago, before starting the program, we present a few lectures, and people like Nina Czegledy or Krista Zomer and some others I met during these lectures. And when Gdańsk wanted to get a Capital of Culture title for 2016, we decided to add something from our institution in this program, and in that time born idea of Art and Science meeting. As you know, Wrocław got this title, but we have the program which we continue, and today we can summarize this decade of existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to go to Krista, if it's okay. We are facing right now an extremely difficult time because of the climate crisis, what Ryszard already mentioned about the catastrophe that we are facing right now. And we know that contemporary art is also building reflection of this topic. In your artistic work, you have often touched upon ecological issues, emphasizing the huge role of plants and environmental protection. Do you see as an artist, but also as a teacher, the special role of artistic institutions and artists for finding solutions that would help minimize the effect of the climate crisis?
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here, to see Jadwiga, Richard, Nina, and Chris, and also you, Alexandra. It's wonderful. Yes, I feel that we as artists have the opportunity, and I would even say somehow partly a responsibility to react to this crisis and also place more ecological issues into our art. At least that's what Laurent Mignonneau and myself want to do. And deal with issues about sustainability and environmental protection, because we really believe that as an artist, we have a different role than, say, as a scientist, because we can appeal to the emotional level of people. I think everybody knows now the facts. We all know there's global warming. We know there's a lot of problems coming up or already existing. And I think most people know this somehow, but many of them, or many of us, feel that we can't do anything about it, and that it's too complex and it's too complicated. But what we noticed with interactive installations, even though it's more abstracted and sort of, more like on a meta level, as soon as people get bodily involved in an experience and they feel that their body or their actions have an effect on a complex environment, such as plants or animals or insects, then they feel like I'm doing something, I can change something, I have an effect. And I think this is something that we feel, maybe it's naive, but we feel that this can be a game changer to people. And we experienced this the first time in 1992, when we did an installation called Interactive Plant Growing, which was a very simple setup. We had plants in a space, and as people came to these plants and started to feel them or started to come towards the plant, they could grow plants on the screen, artificial plants on the screen. And I remember very vividly that many people told us back then, wow, I always knew that plants have feelings, but this is the first time somebody showed this to me. And I think nowadays in botany or in ethobotany or also in specialized plant physiology, there is now more and more awareness and more data, more and more proof that plants have emotions or plants have feelings or plants are intelligent. So I think this is something that we can work with, and we as artists want to address this emotional level, this tacit knowledge that we can, bring to people through interactive experiences dealing with environmental issues. And I think there is so much we can still do about this. And your second question is, on a teaching, on an institutional level, I see a lot of young students also here in Linz, actually at our campus exhibition and the Department of our Interface Culture students. There is quite a few projects where really the young artists want to address these issues, and they find their own way. They do it in their own way. But there's a huge concern, especially after the lockdown situation and the, COVID crisis. It was really, putting people in a very dangerous situation. They couldn't go out, they could not really move. And I think many of us really felt for the first time this really physical impact of the environmental crisis on our lives. And I'm sure we see a big explosion of environmental projects in the near future. It's already starting.
Okay, that's actually great. I'm really happy. Thank you. And now I would like to ask Nina. You curated one of the first exhibition in LAZNIA Center, focusing on the work of outstanding artists of the 20th century, Kepes and Malina, what already Ryszard Kruszczyński mentioned, who worked with the medium of light. And now you're also preparing another exhibition, which will be next year at LAZNIA Center. It will be a collective exhibition. The title is Sensoria, Art and Science of Our Senses. This exhibition will analyze the perception of our surroundings through senses. Taking into consideration those two experiences, could you tell us how does the contemporary practice in art has changed over the decades? What are the most important shifts in those practices?
Thank you. First, before anything else, I would like to thank the director, the team of LAZNIA, and also especially Ryszard Kruszczyński for initiating and continuing this pioneering art and science program. And deeply admire it, and I am very proud that I was able to participate in it for some different projects. So getting back to arts and science, I always mention in my presentations that actually art often serves as a catalyst in interdisciplinary projects. And the catalyst is like a person or an event which participates change. So we have to ask whether today, after so many years, does it still produce change, effective change? Nevertheless, we have experienced an undisputable growth in art and science, various interdisciplinary programs, especially since I started my curatorial experience. My background is both in science, biological science, and in arts. And many years ago, while still working in medical research, I was fascinated by the absolute beauty of the material. And this then led to the first intimate perception exhibition, and many, many interdisciplinary projects followed. The Pleasure of Light, György Kepes and Frank Malina at the intersection of art and science and technology, which was a touring project starting and co-curated with Rona Kopecki in the Ludwig Museum in Budapest, and then moved to LAZNIA, is actually a highlight of my entire career. It was amazing to research and work with this, with the heritage of these two people who were pioneering artists, but focused very much both in their work and also in their social contacts on interdisciplinary interactions. They had a prophetic insight, and they had worked far ahead of their time with environmental projects. 70 years ago. This is an amazing time span. And their work with light, both in private and in public space, became an important tool for them and for the general public, the audience, for improving humankind's relation to the global environment. And in my humble opinion, their work remains a historic milestone in the arts and the sciences. These last years, I worked a lot with sensory perception, and this have extended now to our present COVID-19 pandemic situation, which has affected every aspect of our life, including sensory awareness. And Sensoria, the project, is an interdisciplinary, international initiative centered on multisensory perception in the arts and the sciences. The participating artists come from all over the world, from New Zealand to Berlin to Canada, you name it. And I'm very happy and proud that LAZNIA is going to show the work of these international artists. Getting back to sensory perception, that for the longest time, our senses were considered entirely autonomous perceptual modules, each functioning independently. However, scientific studies have all shown that our experiences are formed by manifold, complex interactions between sensory modalities. And clinical tests indicate today that the senses are not only fundamentally connected, but also that our perception of visual, auditory, or tactile events can be altered dramatically by information from other senses. In the last decades, the notion of the constitution of sentient living beings have changed and expanded, compelling a revision of our awareness, leading to a closer engagement with the traditional experiences of indigenous people. And this is an important point. please note it. Excuse me. But we have to remember that our attitude to nature and our representation of nature is always closely linked to political, religious, environmental, and social consideration. So the impact of these points have to be considered in any projects we are working on in connection with sensory perception. So Sensoria performs a contemporary bridge between science and art and research and production. And all of the exhibitions I ever curated also had related thematically relevant events. And we hope that we can do this, continue this in with the Sensoria exhibition at LAZNIA, and the project will be postponed to 2022. I thank you very much for your listen.
Thank you very much. And now, Chris, you created one of the last exhibitions in LAZNIA, focusing on aspect of important question of our time. We already mentioned many times the pandemic here. How do we sense and make sense in times of extreme precariousness, tumult, and uncertainty? This exhibition touches a very important aspect which might be very present in the future, namely the shift in participation and presentation of art in public. Yes, the whole exhibition was digital and has its own webpage. Do you think that in the future this might be the main curatorial strategy, to go only digital?
Thanks, Alexandra, and thanks to everybody for also organizing the panel. It's difficult to know what the future is at the moment. Actually, the future is based on what politicians and scientists and the media tell us about the next Greek letter for COVID, and or what variant of interest is appearing now. There's a really strange sense, a kind of post-traumatic stress syndrome that there's a sense of trying to return back to some normalcy of before COVID, before 2020. Which of course was also not normal. I think to answer the question, I want to frame it first. As Richard basically stated, something changed in the 1990s, as in late 1990s, as we suddenly realized that we actually live in a world that's organized by media technologies, the world that scientists and computer scientists starting in the 1920s, 1930s imagined, but didn't actually see. I mean, if you think about someone like John von Neumann, who essentially is responsible for not only the digital computer, but thinking about DNA, thinking about the strategies that humans take to play games and optimize their self-interest, all those things have come to roost, even though he died in the early 1950s. So we live in that world, but it's not a utopia. It's not the utopia that we all imagined. I mean, if we look back in some of those media art shows of the 1960s, which were in the backdrop of the Vietnam War, and then we look at 1990s, which were the backdrop of the dot-com boom, we kind of look at those and say, how naive were people? There was an article in the New York Times last year that actually was titled, "Silicon Valley is not your friend." So there is in many ways a new urgency around artistic production. At the same time, with technology, and at the same time, there is an incredible backlash against technology, particularly on gender, racial, accessibility lines, as Nina was bringing up indigenous questions. So the utopia is over. There's a recent book from MIT Press called "Your Computer is on Fire." And it basically seems to say that, you know, we now live in that world, and what has it brought us? It's brought increased isolation among human beings we're all connected, but we somehow are more isolated. We are now within a technological realm, which climate scientists call the technosphere, in which the autonomy of machines matches the autonomy of human beings. And not to be pessimistic, because of these kinds of systems, there's a kind of total attack on democratic rule, democracy itself, where we have now situations where people who have lived together for many years now pretend the other don't exist, pretend basically that my opinion is truth and your opinion is not. So we're in this incredibly complex situation that we seem to have no way out of. Now, sensory orders reacted to the situation. Now, the title of that exhibition that we did in LAZNIA in 2020, in the midst of COVID, it was planned as a physical exhibition, but I also knew that it would be closed even when it opened, which actually what came to pass. We also planned it online. We also planned it as a publication. So this was nothing new. I mean, the question about, is the future, is this a new kind of curatorial strategy? Already in the 1990s, when the internet kind of exploded as a public communication system, museums and galleries were already thinking about, this kind of online world and relationship to the physical world. We approached sensory orders because that way, conceiving of it both physically, online, and as a book, because we were forced to do it. The circumstances dictated that. It was not just an add-on. It was basically, given the conditions, this is how we responded. Now, that exhibition actually was titled Sensory Orders based on an unusual source. It was based on a book by Friedrich Hayek, who some of you know was an important economist who essentially developed models of what we call now neoliberalism. Essentially, is one of the founders of that discipline, or that, let's say, ideology. It's not a discipline. And Hayek himself basically was interested in essentially how forms of complexity cannot be designed, but actually emerge in and of themselves in relationship to parts interacting in new and potentially unpredictable ways. So I would say very much that the exhibition tried to capture, it wasn't a COVID exhibition, but tried to capture the mood, in German, the Stimmung, the sense of that particular period last year, which continues. I would say, just to conclude, that curatorially, clearly cultural institutions are going through once again a transformation. It's a transformation that's coming out of COVID, but it's also a transformation in terms of, we've all talked about the monster in the room, which is, of course, climate change. Given the environmental status of the world, it's hard to imagine, even though you see the tension to go back, the ethos we have now to go back to models where people fly for a conference for one day across the world and then fly back. So in fact, these kinds of virtual meetings that have been happening that everyone is tired of will continue, simply because the planet cannot no longer sustain the kind of models of culture that we imagined, or institutionalized culture that we imagined pre-19. And this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity, of course, to reach global audiences, like many of these events do. And I see that there will be a much more increasing hybridity between the sites, physical sites, and then this online presence, and that these things, we're still in this very early stage. I think these things will start to find interesting new forms that will blossom out of conditions that basically become both interesting but necessary for us to survive.
Thank you very much. Do we have still time for one more question to all of you, or not really, because I don't know?
I'm sure we have.
Yes, okay. So I have a question about the future, because like I said, during the last 10 years, LAZNIA Center has offered a wide spectrum of exhibitions, conferences, debates, and so on. What are the new challenges for LAZNIA Center in terms of an artistic and educational program for the next decade?
So, to whom this question? To me or to Richard?
Whoever wants to answer.
I can say, for example, that in terms of research, I'd like very much to start the project. The working title is Art and Science Institutional Perspective. I'd like to invite people from very different fields, people from museums and galleries working with art and science, educators, people from universities, for example, those who created the network, global network of science gallery. This Trinity College initiated this years ago. There is a number of people. I'd like actually to invite people to reflect on the process. We should remember, for example, about Common Room, the project created by Stefan and Franziska Temersons in the 50s, where they invited artists, writers, and scientists to discuss together, to discuss about what different disciplines have to offer the others and what is the result for the world. So it's, I think, the moment to make such a research and to finalize this research with a book, trying to make a vision on the whole process from the 90s, 50s up to now. So this is what I'm interested very much to do. Jadwiga may say a few words about the exhibitions planned for coming years.
It's difficult to discuss now about exhibition plans, especially after our coronavirus experience. And of course, we have some plans. It's one way is that this unstable situation in the world by this what happened. But also in Poland, another reason is different situation for this kind of institution like ours, because we don't know what will be with supporting from Ministry of Culture. Of course, we are looking for money abroad, but it's not easy, and in this moment it's organized a bit different way than simple thinking about a concrete exhibition. Of course, we have plans for a few years ago. As you know, we postponed exhibition planned this year by prepared by Nina, and we hope that we could do it in sensible shape next year. And we have some plans for a few next years, but I am thinking now distance next year and 23, because for us also important, because in 23 we will celebrate our 25th anniversary. It's also important summary for us. And now slowly thinking what would be important position in our program, especially in point of view that almost 20 I am running this institution, and a few years ago we celebrate 20th anniversary when we try to describe our activity for whole fields. Now I think we will try to follow this what is our main program, and we have what is the most important. Of course, now I don't want to say exactly details, but as I said on the beginning, when we describe our activities a few years ago, it's a clear line that we are running with art and science, what is also important also on Polish math, but in fact not many institutions touching this material, because it's not easy, and a lot of colleagues who are running culture institutions like LAZNIA's. It's touching closer this what is in shape of the interest, and when I start to run LAZNIA, it's important that my background is fine art academy. It's I don't searching by a line of historical point of view, but also what is new, what is can be, I can say, adventure, and looking for what is interesting in art.
Great, thank you very much. I just got the sign that we must to finish right now, even though there is a lot of questions and topics that would be great to discuss, but maybe in the future, I hope. I would like to thank you all, to all speakers. Thank you very much for this inspiring and stimulating our mind-brain discussion. And thank you also to the audience, to the participants for your time and presence. So thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
It's great to meet you virtually.
Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful.